He thought I wouldn't find out, thought I'd sit quietly in that recliner while he and my own son wrapped my legacy in a blanket and tried to sell it to the highest bidder. The rifle I carried through war, the one that watched men die, the one that came home when they didn't. My nephew called it just a piece of metal. My son said, "It's not like anyone remembers that war anymore." And then they smiled. But what they didn't know was that I'd already prepared the one thing they hadn't: a reckoning signed in ink, sealed in memory, and waiting beneath the glass. So before I show you the exact moment they tried to sell my World War II rifle behind my back, and the paperwork I pulled that stopped them cold, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, tap like, subscribe with the bell turned on, and stick around, because today's story isn't about a gun, it's about what you do when the people you raised try to sell your service. So let's dive deeper into the story. I've outlived a lot of things. I've outlived the men I trained beside, the ones who joked too loud on quiet nights and went quiet in places no one should have to remember. I've outlived the sound of boots on gravel at dawn, the smell of burned oil in the cold, the letters that stopped coming after a certain winter. I even outlived the world that once understood what it meant to carry a rifle not for thrill, but because someone had to stand where others couldn't. But that rifle, it never left me. It sits in a narrow wooden case beside the living room wall, polished the same way I've kept it since 1945. Not as a weapon, not as a trophy. As the last physical witness to the day we walked out of a country others only read about in thin history books. A civilian wouldn't see much in it, just old steel and scarred wood. But to me, every mark is a voice. Every worn line is a hand that once trembled beside mine. It belonged first to a boy named Harold Knox, red-haired, couldn't grow a beard to save his life, barely 20. We were assigned the same ridge during our first real push. He told me he kept a coin from his mother in his pocket because it made him feel like home couldn't disappear. 3 nights later, he was bleeding against the dirt, gripping the barrel of this very rifle like it could still hold him to the world if he just didn't let go. He asked me if I'd remember him. I told him soldiers don't forget their own. He never made it to morning. When the dust finally settled and the evacuation trucks coughed us back toward something that looked like safety, the rifle was handed to me as if it already knew where it belonged. I never replaced it, never traded it, never even thought of letting it go. Every Sunday, I oiled the wood the way a man brushes the grave of someone he loved. I unlock the case slow, let the hinges sigh, and run my hands along the barrel with the quiet care of memory. Some people collect photographs. I kept this because it reminds me that everything warm I stand on now once cost something cold. There were years I couldn't pay for decent heating, months I ate bread that should have been thrown out before a sensible man would take it. Still, not once did I consider selling it. There are things you don't turn into cash, not because they're priceless, but because they were never meant for trade. It isn't about pride, it's about promise. The rifle is what made sure a boy like Harold Knox didn't die alone and nameless. It carries his silence, my living breath, and every heartbeat that still rings behind my ribs when the night goes too quiet. And no man, not even family, had ever touched that case without my hand turning the key. Not until they thought I wasn't paying attention. My nephew, Eric, has always had a way of smiling while taking things that weren't his. Not in the obvious way. He wasn't a thief in the dark or the kind to break windows. He was subtler than that, the kind who borrows money and forgets it's a loan, who brings home gadgets bought with someone else's card, then shrugs like debt is just a mood. Always working on something, Always a new hustle. Cryptocurrency last year, sneakers the year before, something with sports cards before that. He was raised well enough. My late wife never spoke ill of him, mostly because she never really trusted him enough to get close. But my son, Daniel, insisted we keep him around. "He's family," he'd say. "He's just trying to find his way." Eric had that kind of charm that made people believe he was harmless. Quick smile, good posture, clean haircut. You'd think he was a schoolteacher if you didn't notice his shoes cost more than his car. He started taking an interest in the rifle a few months after Helen passed. Came by one weekend while Daniel was helping me reorganize the storage room. Just strolled into the living room and stood there, arms folded, staring at the case like it held treasure. "Uncle Tommy," he said, dragging the words out like he was about to pitch me something. "That the real deal?" I didn't look up from the drawer I was sorting. "It's not for sale." He laughed, one of those chuckles that's meant to sound casual but comes too fast. "I didn't ask if it was. Just saying, things like that? Collectors would pay a mint." I stood and faced him. "It's not a thing, Eric." He raised his hands like I'd snapped at him. Hey, no offense, just saying. If it were mine, I'd probably cash out while people still care about World War II. Sentimental stuff doesn't exactly pay the bills." Daniel walked in from the garage and clapped a hand on Eric's shoulder, light but firm. "Let it go," he told him. "That rifle's more sacred than church around here." Eric gave me that grin again. "Sure, I get it. It's history. Just, if you ever change your mind, I've got some contacts who deal in vintage arms. Legal guys, high-end." I didn't answer, just turned and started placing photo albums back onto the shelf. Eric wandered off to the kitchen, whistling something tuneless. That should have been the end of it. A throwaway comment. Just a spoiled kid sniffing around a piece of metal he didn't understand. But I'd seen that look in his eyes. It wasn't curiosity. It was calculation. And it stayed with me long after he left the room. Daniel's always been the steady one. He was never like Eric, not even when they were boys. Where Eric talked, Daniel listened. Where Eric pushed, Daniel paced. He worked a union job for 28 years and never once missed a morning call. Wears the same watch he did in college, drives a sedan with more miles than most marriages last. There's a weight to Daniel. Not heavy, but solid. Or at least, there used to be. He came over the next weekend to help replace a kitchen hinge. Nothing special. He always brought his own tools, though I still had mine, and he always ended up staying for coffee. We talked about little things, weather, groceries, his back acting up. Neither of us mentioned the rifle. But as he finished tightening the last screw on the cabinet door, he stood up, dusted his hands off, and nodded toward the living room. "You ever think about selling it?" he asked. Casual, like he was asking if I'd thought about switching banks. I didn't pretend not to know what he meant. "No," I said plainly. He leaned on the counter. "I mean, just saying. It's not like it's usable. You've got pictures, you've got the medals. That thing's just sitting." I looked at him, and for a moment I saw his face as a boy again. The same eyes that watched cartoons with a bowl of cereal on his knees. The same eyes that widened when I used to tell him stories from the jungle. But now those eyes were tired, practical, dull in the corners. "It's not about whether it's usable," I said. "It's about what it carried, who it carried." He gave a quiet sigh through his nose, rubbed the back of his neck. "Dad, I respect it. I do. I'm just saying, if something were to happen to you, it's not exactly like Eric or I could explain the importance of it to anyone else. I mean, to us, it's just—" He stopped himself. Well, I get it matters to you. I'm just saying, we wouldn't get in the way if you ever wanted to part with it. I let the silence stretch. Then I asked, "Is this about Eric?" Daniel looked up, eyes briefly flickering with guilt before settling back into their tired calm. "No, he mentioned it again, yeah, but he's not going to touch it. I told him. That case doesn't open unless you're here." I watched him for a moment longer. He meant it. At least I think he did. "Good," I said softly, "because that rifle's not just locked. It's trusted. There's a difference." He nodded, but I could feel the divide between us widen just slightly. Not a break. Not yet. Just a quiet shift, like a weight being moved half an inch to one side of a beam. He gathered his tools, packed them neatly back into his case. We made small talk at the door. He hugged me, one hand on my shoulder, said he'd call tomorrow. And as I watched him drive away, I felt something I hadn't felt since the war. That calm before you realize the breach doesn't come with sirens. It comes with silence. It was a Thursday afternoon when I noticed it. Nothing dramatic, no busted lock or broken glass. Just a feeling, the kind that settles low in the chest before your mind even catches up. I'd been dusting the mantel, something I still do every week, even though the only people who'd notice are gone now. I was passing by the cabinet, that narrow walnut display case where the rifle lives, when I saw the edge of the latch. Off by just a hair, not swung open, not pried, just not flush. I stopped, stared. The case is old, but not fragile. The brass fittings are stiff, the kind you have to lean into just a bit to get them to click into place. I always close it tight. Always. I knelt slowly, joints cracking like gravel in a bucket, and ran my fingers along the seam. Then the lock. It was engaged, but the edges had been scuffed. Tiny scratches near the keyhole. Not deep, just new. The key still sat on its hook in the drawer where I kept it, untouched. But the cabinet? That had been opened. I unlocked it, lifted the lid. The rifle was still inside, resting in its felt cradle. Still gleamed faintly with the oil I'd rubbed in 3 days ago. Still pointed east like always. But the smell was wrong. The air inside the case had been disturbed. The scent of metal and oil, normally sealed, had gone faint. It didn't hit the way it should have. Not like memory, like air, like exposure. I didn't say anything. Not out loud, just closed the lid, relocked it, and stood back up slower than I sat. I told myself maybe I'd left it cracked by mistake, that maybe I'd been careless. Getting older does that. You forget. You miss things. But I don't miss this. That night, Daniel called, asked if I'd eaten, said Eric had dropped by earlier while he was here, wanted to see the old place again. Said he showed him the display cabinet. He didn't open it, Daniel added, like that made it better. Just looked. Right, I said, keeping my voice even. Just looked. Figured you'd be okay with that, he added. I mean, it's behind glass. Sure, he paused. You okay, Dad? Fine, I said. Tired is all. We hung up not long after. He probably thought I went to bed early that night, but I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table with the light off, my back to the living room, watching the shadow of that case. It wasn't the rifle being touched that disturbed me. It was how easy it was for them to do it without thinking it mattered. Like the promise I'd kept to the dead meant less than curiosity. Like memory could be peeked at, then shut again, like nothing sacred had been disturbed. The call came 2 mornings later. I was out in the shed sharpening the garden shears I hadn't used in months, not because I had any pruning to do, but because I needed to keep my hands busy. Some men carve wood. I keep blades clean. It's a habit that never left me. Keep your tools sharp and your ears open. The phone buzzed on the counter inside. I let it ring once, then twice, before wiping my hands and heading in. Unknown number, local area code. "Hello?" A man's voice, soft but cautious. "Mr. Keene?" "Yes. This is Mike over at Franklin Firearms and Collectibles. You might not remember me. We met once years back when you donated that WWII compass for display." I remembered. He was younger than most in that business, but respectful. Clean shop, no nonsense. "What can I do for you?" He cleared his throat, and the hesitation made the hairs on my neck rise. "I just wanted to double-check something, sir. A young man came in yesterday asking about a World War II service rifle, said it belonged to his uncle, claimed it had a custom brass plate on the stock and a decommission tag etched near the rear sight." My voice stayed level, but I felt something cold ripple down my spine. "Go on." "Said he was looking to get a price quote. Described it in detail, right down to a small crack near the handguard. Thing is, sir, I've seen that rifle. You brought it in once, years ago, just to show me. Said you'd never part with it." I didn't answer right away. Mike continued. "I didn't take anything in. Told him I'd need paperwork. Honestly, he seemed more interested in what kind of buyers I knew than actually selling, but something felt off. Thought I should give you a heads up. He said his name was Eric." I closed my eyes. "Thank you, Mike. That's more than most would have done." He hesitated again. "Just be careful, all right? Some of these younger guys don't understand what they're messing with. That kind of piece, it doesn't belong in a collection. It belongs in a story." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "Yeah," I said. "It does." We ended the call. I didn't move for a long while, just stood in the middle of the kitchen, staring at nothing. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that wraps around you like cold wool. It wasn't just the betrayal that hit me, it was the method. Calm, calculated, no forced entry, no yelling, just quiet coordination. He knew what it was. He knew it wasn't his. And still, he'd tried to sell it. With my own son likely giving him the description. It wasn't the war that felt far away in that moment. It was the family I thought I still had. I didn't call him right away. I let the day pass, took my usual walk around the neighborhood, waved at folks I barely knew anymore, and came back to a house that felt like someone else's coat. Familiar, but not warm. I made dinner I didn't eat, washed a dish I didn't use, and then, when the sky had turned the color of old paper, I picked up the phone and called Daniel. He answered on the second ring. "Hey, Dad, everything all right?" I didn't waste time. "Eric tried to sell the rifle." Silence. It stretched just long enough for the truth to step out from wherever it had been hiding. "He asked around," Daniel said finally, his voice measured. "But he didn't actually sell it." I held the phone tighter. "You knew." "I didn't know he was serious." "You knew." He exhaled, slow and tired, like this was something I was making difficult for him. "Look, he brought it up. He was curious. I figured it was just another one of his dumb ideas. I told him it wasn't his to touch." "But you didn't stop him." "I didn't help him either," he snapped, more defensive than angry. "He asked what it might be worth. That's it. I didn't think he'd actually go to a pawn shop." "He described it in detail," I said. "The brass plate, the handguard crack, The serial tag location. He didn't get that from memory. He got it from you, or from handling it. Daniel didn't speak for a moment. Then, in a lower voice, "It's just a rifle, Dad." And there it was, just a rifle. Not the weight of a friend who bled out with it clutched to his chest. Not the nights I'd spent turning it over in my hands when I couldn't sleep. Not the one thing I'd kept after Helen passed that still smelled like both earth and purpose. Just a rifle. I didn't yell. I didn't even raise my voice. Instead, I said something I don't think either of us was ready to hear. "You didn't just break trust. You reduced it." Daniel tried to speak, but I cut him off. "I never asked you to keep it. I only ever asked you to respect it. And now I see that was already too much." He went quiet again, this time longer. Finally, he muttered, "I didn't think it would matter this much." "It always matters," I said. "That's the difference between you and me." I hung up before he could respond, not out of anger, out of finality. That night, I didn't lock the rifle case, not out of neglect, out of clarity, because locks don't protect legacies. Attention does. And mine was finally wide awake. After that call, I stopped saying much of anything. No more reminders, no more warnings. I didn't bring up the rifle again, didn't mention the scratches on the cabinet or the whisper-thin layer of dust that always looked disturbed after someone else had been near it. I just watched. Old soldiers know the power of observation. You don't always stop the ambush before it happens. Sometimes you let the enemy walk close enough to show their face. I started paying attention to their visits, noticed how Eric began dropping by more often. Not for meals, not to help with chores, just casual pop-ins. "Thought I'd see how you're doing, Uncle Tommy," he'd say, bouncing on the balls of his feet like he had somewhere better to be. His eyes always lingered a little too long on the living room wall. Once, I caught him glancing at my keys in the dish near the front door. Just a second too long. Calculating. The kind of look that measures distance, not sentiment. Daniel, meanwhile, had gone quiet in a different way. He didn't bring Eric up anymore, didn't mention the rifle. We spoke about the weather, about his knees, about the porch light I still hadn't replaced, but not about what mattered. I noticed he started keeping his voice low when Eric called him, stepping onto the back porch during their conversations. Sometimes I heard laughter, sometimes nothing at all. It was during one of those half-heard phone calls that I heard it, Daniel saying, "He's stubborn, yeah, but we can probably make it work if we play it right." Make it work if we play it right. Like I was an obstacle to be managed, not a man to be spoken to. I didn't confront them, not yet. I started keeping notes instead. Quiet ones, times, dates, glances exchanged. I even found a crumpled envelope tucked between the couch cushions one afternoon after they'd left, addressed to a name I didn't recognize, but bearing the letterhead of a known private collector from the next county over. That name stuck with me. I looked it up. Turns out the man was a well-known military memorabilia dealer, specializing in World War pieces, particularly rifles. I cross-checked his collection inventory online. He had 3 rifles almost identical to mine, all documented with matching paperwork and tribute letters. It wasn't hard to see what was coming. Eric had found his buyer. Daniel was smoothing the road. And me? I kept quiet. Because sometimes revenge isn't a strike. It's a stillness that waits, a silence that lets arrogance walk straight into its own consequence. The day before everything came to a head, I opened the case again. Not out of routine, not to oil the barrel or adjust the sling strap. I opened it because I needed to remember who I was before all of this. before betrayal came wearing familiar faces. The key slid in with the same slight resistance I'd known for decades. The lock gave way with its soft click, and I lifted the lid like I was cracking open a coffin. There it was, exactly where I'd left it. The rifle looked the same as it always had, polished, steady, waiting. But this time, I reached beneath the foam lining. There's a false bottom most people don't notice. Inside it, wrapped in the same oilcloth I'd carried through France, was a photograph I hadn't touched in years. 4 of us, standing crooked in the sun, squinting through dust, helmets lopsided and smiles crooked. Young, so goddamn young. The man on the far left was Harold, red hair, eyes too bright for war. Beside him, Martinez, grinning like he'd already survived it all. Then me. Then Corporal Denton, who never made it past June. Only I'm left now. I unfolded the picture slowly. The edges were soft from age, but the ink still held. Our boots were caked in mud. Someone had scrawled, "Charlie Company, 45" on the back in grease pencil. Probably me, maybe Helen. I held it in my hand for a long time before laying it against the inside of the case, just under the barrel. The wood touched the top edge like it recognized the men it used to rest beside. Funny thing about time, it dulls a lot, but it sharpens what matters. I remembered that last night on the ridge, the sounds, the stink of copper and cordite, the way Harold pressed the rifle into my hands when his leg was bleeding too fast for prayer. "Don't let them sell it," he'd said. "Not keep it, not bury it." He knew what the world would become. Even then. I remember crouching beside him until his grip loosened. I remember the noise of mortars in the distance and the way the stars didn't blink that night, just stared. I remember dragging him back until my arms gave out. That rifle made it home. He didn't. And now here I was, 70-some years later, watching 2 men with my blood in their veins reduce it to profit. I ran my fingers along the metal, soft and slow, the way a man reads a name etched on a grave. And I said, out loud and quiet, "Don't worry, Harold. I've got it." That night, I locked the case again. But this time, I didn't hang the key back in the drawer. I put it on a chain around my neck. Because the next move wouldn't come from behind a door. It would come from me. The lawyer's office was in a strip mall that had seen better days. Faded parking lines, a shuttered bakery on one end, a martial arts studio with dusty trophies in the window on the other. Between them, a glass door with peeling gold letters. Richard Alton, attorney at law. Inside, it smelled faintly of old carpet and lukewarm coffee, but the desk was clean and the flag in the corner stood tall. Rick Alton had once been a National Guardsman. I remembered him from the VFW years ago. Always the quiet one. Always scribbling something down. He'd gone on to law school after his service, built a small estate and trust practice for people like us. Men who didn't want their lives summarized in boilerplate ink. When he saw me come through the door, he stood right away. "Sergeant Major Keene," he said, offering his hand. "Been a while?" "Still remember how to shake, I hope," I said, gripping firmly. He smiled at that. We sat. I didn't offer the full story, just enough. "I need to update some directives," I told him. "My will, primarily, but also the legacy handling instructions for my military possessions." He didn't blink, just pulled out a fresh folder and clicked his pen. "Any changes in beneficiary assignments?" I nodded. "The rifle. The one I registered under the ceremonial deactivation clause. I want it removed from the general asset pool. It's not to pass to my son, or to any living family." He paused. You're sure? Absolutely. I want it transferred to the Regional War Memorial Hall. Custodial donation, no resale, no repurposing, lock and glass case only. He wrote it down. With a ceremonial note? Yes, I said. I've already typed the inscription. I'll bring it in tomorrow. I want it printed and notarized as part of the package. He nodded again, slow and respectful. I added, I want the transfer scheduled in advance. No surprises. I'll walk it in myself, with the final papers in hand. Once the item is received, the Foundation will sign a custodial certificate. And your family? He asked gently. They don't need to be notified. He didn't argue. Men like Rick understand when a soldier has already crossed the internal line between family and kin. We went over the details, timeline, language, backup signatory. He asked if I wanted to include anything else, a statement of intent, a final directive for public ceremony. No, I said. No speeches, no flag folding, just a rifle, a nameplate, and a locked case where it'll stay safe. Rick sat back and nodded. You know, it's rare. What is? He looked up. When someone leaves something behind that's not meant to be touched, only remembered. I didn't say anything to that, because remembering's the whole point, isn't it? They picked a Saturday. I knew they would. People always pick Saturdays for things they want to feel clean. Weekend crowd, daylight cover, easier alibis. I'd seen this kind of thing play out before, not in gun shops, but in old supply trucks parked off Afghan hillsides. The same mixture of confidence and quiet theft. Same breath just before the fall. They thought I didn't know. Daniel had called the night before, casual as you like. Thinking of taking Eric out to breakfast tomorrow. Might swing by after. You gonna be home? Sure, I said. I'll be around. He hesitated. You need anything? Not a thing. He hung up, thinking he was still ahead. But I'd already mapped the pieces. Earlier that week, I'd seen the collector's name again, scratched in sloppy ink on a slip of mail Daniel left in my garage after helping with some boxes. I'd checked the address, not far, 30 minutes west. An industrial space with private entries and no signage. A handshake kind of place. So that morning, while they thought I was sitting in my recliner sipping black coffee, I was already parked across the street from the collector's building. Driver's side angled just enough to watch the lot. I watched them arrive 10 minutes apart. Eric first, always early when there's money involved. He pulled up in a borrowed SUV. The rear window was covered with a blanket from my guest closet. I recognized the pattern. Daniel showed up next, parking 2 spaces away, dressed like he didn't want to be noticed, but clean. Sunday best. He walked to Eric's car, opened the back. From where I sat, I couldn't see the rifle. But I didn't need to. I could feel it. They stood there, talking low. Eric pulled out a folder, probably the fake paperwork. Daniel handed him something from his coat pocket. A key, maybe. Then the collector came out, flanked by 2 assistants, and the transaction began. I didn't move. Not yet. They were halfway through opening the trunk when I stepped out of my car. Didn't slam the door, didn't shout, just walked across the lot, slow and steady, like I had nowhere else to be and all the time in the world. Eric was bent over, unzipping the blanket when he saw my shadow. He straightened like he'd been punched in the gut. Daniel turned slower. His face said everything. Surprise, dread, calculation, the whole cocktail. I didn't stop until I was 3 feet from them. Going somewhere? I asked. Neither answered. The collector, confused, looked between us. Is there a problem? I looked at him. Not yet. Eric cleared his throat. Uncle, look, this was just a— No, I said. This was exactly what it looks like. Then I turned to the man they were selling to. You might want to put your hands back in your pockets, sir. You're about to be shown something illegal. The collector stiffened. His eyes darted between me and the rifle case like he was trying to guess how loud this was about to get. Sir, he said carefully, if there's some misunderstanding here— No misunderstanding, I said, reaching into my coat. Just a clarification. I pulled out the envelope Rick Alton had prepared. Heavy stock, signed, dated, and stamped twice. I handed it to the collector. That rifle, I said, is a decommissioned relic assigned legal custodianship to the Regional War Memorial Hall, effective immediately upon attempted transfer without owner consent. The documentation inside includes proof of chain of custody, archival registration, and notarized ownership restrictions. The man opened it, skimming quickly. Daniel took a step forward. Dad, come on! I turned on him, calm but sharp. Don't! Eric looked pale. What the hell is this? What it is, I said, nodding toward the papers, is a legally binding directive. That rifle is not just mine. It's recognized by the state as a preserved ceremonial artifact. That means no resale, no private acquisition, and certainly no unauthorized transfer. The collector held up a hand, already stepping back. I don't want any trouble. You've got none from me, I said, as long as you walk away. And don't come sniffing near anything tied to this uniform again. He didn't argue, just handed the papers to one of his assistants and backed off toward the building. I watched him disappear into the side door without so much as a closing word. Eric started to speak again, but I cut him off. Save it. You're not clever. You're not misunderstood. You're just someone who thought memory was for sale. Daniel looked stunned, not angry, not even ashamed, just stripped bare. Dad, we didn't know about the papers, he said, but it sounded hollow even as he said it. That's the problem, isn't it? I said. You didn't ask. You assumed. You acted like it was yours to consider. Eric finally found his voice. You set us up. No, I said, stepping closer. I let you walk where you weren't supposed to, and I let the law do what my disappointment couldn't. I looked down at the rifle case sitting in the open trunk. The same blanket, the same folded photo, tucked beneath the buttstock where I'd left it. They hadn't even noticed it. I reached in and lifted the rifle out myself. It felt heavier than usual, or maybe I was just carrying more than I used to. I cradled it against my chest like I had in the jungle once, like I had when I brought it home. Daniel didn't say a word. Eric looked like he was trying to decide whether to speak or flee, but neither moved, because this wasn't just a stopped sale. It was a judgment they hadn't expected to come with paperwork. I didn't leave right away. I stood there beside the open trunk, the rifle in my arms, the cold wind brushing against my sleeves like the ghost of a hand I used to know. Eric looked like he wanted to say something clever. Daniel looked like he was waiting for me to explode, but I wasn't angry. No, anger's fast. This had taken its time. Grown roots, spread quiet like rot under a floorboard. So I spoke calmly, not to break them, but to show them what they'd already broken. You know what this is? I said, holding up the rifle. Not for pride, but for clarity. This isn't a relic. It's not an antique. It's not some display piece with a price tag. They stayed silent. This was carried by a boy who never made it past 20. It was gripped by hands that bled in dirt you've never walked. It was passed to me when the man holding it couldn't anymore, And you tried to flip it like it was a lucky coin. Eric shifted, tried to cross his arms, but his posture betrayed him. His chest sank in. His eyes dropped. Daniel spoke, finally. Quiet. It wasn't meant to go that far. Then why did you help him load it? I asked. Why did you give him the serial number, the specs, my blanket to cover it with? He didn't answer. Your mother, I said, stepping toward him, used to say that memory is a kind of service. It lives in the things we keep, the uniforms, the photos, the silence. I looked at Eric. You don't remember anything, because you never cared enough to ask. Then I looked at Daniel. And you remembered just enough to betray it. That landed. His shoulders tensed, his jaw worked, but no words came out. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I just let the truth sit in the air, heavy and clean. This rifle was never for sale, I said. Not because I wanted to hoard it, but because some things deserve to be protected from people who confuse possession with meaning. I walked to my car, opened the door, and rested the rifle across the back seat. Then I turned one last time. To both of you, this isn't about a gun. It's about what you chose to value when no one was watching. And the answer is clear. I shut the door. The sound echoed in the parking lot. Sharp. Final. I didn't look back when I drove away. Didn't check the mirror. Didn't watch them standing there like boys caught sneaking out of class. I'd already seen enough. And more than that, I'd felt enough. Some breaks you hear when they happen. Others, you only notice when you try to lean on what's no longer there. When I got home, I parked the car under the same oak. Helen used to say dropped its leaves too early. The rifle was still across the back seat, calm as ever. I reached in, lifted it gently, and carried it up the front steps like I had 1,000 times before, like I was walking it back from the edge of something cruel. Inside, the house was quiet, familiar, a little cold. I didn't put the rifle back in the cabinet. Not this time. I laid it on the kitchen table, cleared a space, lit the small desk lamp I kept by the phone. Then I pulled out the document from Rick's office and signed the transfer line. The name of the War Memorial Hall printed clean and bold at the top. They'd take care of it. They understood. They still ran taps at funerals and folded flags the right way. They knew how to lock memory in glass, not to hide it, but to guard it. I sat for a long while after that. The house was too still, and yet I didn't mind it. When the phone rang hours later, I didn't need to check the caller ID. I picked up. Daniel's voice came on low. Dad. He didn't follow it up. No excuses this time, just breath on the line. I waited. When he didn't speak, I said, You taught me something. He swallowed. What's that? I looked down at the rifle, the reflection of the lamp catching on the metal. You taught me who you chose to become. He didn't argue, didn't plead. I think some part of him knew those words weren't meant as punishment. They were a closing line, the kind that lands like a slow salute. After a moment, I said, We're done for now. Then I hung up. Not out of hate, but because respect isn't born from apology. It's born from action, and I hadn't seen any yet. The sky was clear the morning I took the rifle in. No rain, no wind, just that brittle kind of sunlight that falls in autumn when the world forgets how to be warm but hasn't yet decided to be cold. I loaded the rifle into the case myself, slowly, carefully, same way you fold a flag, placed the folded photograph beneath it, then the typed plaque, then closed the lid and latched it shut. I didn't need help carrying it. The War Memorial Hall sat 2 towns over. Small building, brickwork faded, flags out front, always flying proper. One American, one state, one POW MIA. I'd given a talk there once, years back, the kind they ask older vets to give when school groups come through, right before Veterans Day. I remember kids squirming in their folding chairs, polite but restless. One girl stayed after, asked me what the scariest part of the war was. "Coming home," I'd told her. Now I was back, not with words, but with what I'd kept safe all this time. A volunteer named Ray met me at the front. Younger man, maybe mid-40s, wore a ball cap with a navy pin clipped to the brim. "You Sergeant Major Keene?" "I am." He looked at the case in my arms. "That it?" I nodded. He led me inside, down the central hall where the displays lived, shadow boxes on the walls, shelves with letters in plastic sleeves, rusted helmets under glass. Quiet things. Stories you have to lean in to hear. He gestured to a clean case already prepared. Glass, sealed edges, foam base, angled spotlights above. "We made room," he said. I stepped forward, unlatched the case, and lifted the rifle out one last time. My fingers knew the grooves without thinking. I set it down soft, like laying someone to rest. Placed the plaque just below it. M1 Garand Rifle, carried by Sergeant Harold Knox, KIA, June 1945, and Sergeant Major Thomas Keene, retire, dedicated in memory. Preserved in truth. Ray sealed the case. "You want to say anything?" he asked. I shook my head. The men it belonged to already said enough. He nodded and stepped back. No cameras, no speeches, no applause, just a rifle, finally home. I stood there a while longer, hands behind my back, watching the light catch the metal. It didn't feel like a goodbye. It felt like putting something important exactly where it was meant to be. Out of reach, but never out of memory. It was late when the call came. I'd just sat down with a mug of tea and the kind of stillness that only comes after you've done something hard, but right. The rifle was gone now, safe, locked, displayed under clean light and quiet respect. There was no longer a weight in the corner of my home, but there was still one sitting behind my ribs. The phone rang twice before I picked up. "Hey, Dad," Daniel's voice again, softer this time. No script behind it, just hesitation. "I saw the photos," he said. "Online. Memorial Hall posted them." I didn't answer right away. He cleared his throat. "They did it up nice. Looks good." Still, I said nothing. I wanted to say I was sorry. For everything. I didn't I didn't see it the way you did. Not until now." I let the words hang, let him sit in them. "Eric's embarrassed," he added. "Won't talk to me much. Maybe that's for the best." "Maybe," I said. There was a long pause on the line. Then Daniel asked, "Do you hate me?" "No," I said, not even thinking. "But I don't trust you. Not yet." He let out a breath, like he'd been holding it since the phone rang. "Fair," he said. "That's fair." I reached for my tea, sipped it once. "You want to make this right? You start by understanding that legacy isn't about what you inherit. It's about what you protect. And you didn't." He was quiet again. Then, with a roughness in his voice I hadn't heard since he was a teenager, "Can I earn it back?" "That's not up to me," I said. That's up to the time and the choices you make when no one's watching. I'll try, he said. I nodded to myself, though he couldn't see it. Then we'll see. We ended the call not with closure, but with something better: accountability. And as the silence settled back around me, I looked across the room to the empty display case where the rifle used to sit. It wasn't a void. It was a reminder that not everything lost is gone, but some things, once disrespected, shouldn't be given back. Would you forgive your own child after this kind of betrayal? Should family loyalty ever outweigh protecting a soldier's legacy? And did I do the right thing by removing the rifle from my bloodline? Let me know what you think in the comments. I read every single one. If this story meant something to you, hit that like button, subscribe with the bell turned on, and share it with someone who still believes in honor, memory, and what's worth defending. And while you're here, go ahead and check out the other stories on your screen right now. Each one tells a different truth, but they all end the same way, with dignity restored. I'll see you tomorrow, same time, with another brand new story.